Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this wonderful Bucharest Forum 2020. My name is Stephen Erlanger. I'm the diplomatic correspondent in Europe for the New York Times. And I have an enormous pleasure today to have a beginning conversation with Maroš Šefčovič, who is a very senior European Union official. He's vice president of the Commission for, if I can pronounce this properly, Interinstitutional Relations and Foresight. Foresight's key. But he is a Slovak. He's very experienced with the EU. He's worked on health. He's worked on energy. He's worked on youth. He's worked on digital. He's worked on Brexit. And today he has great responsibility in part for seeing through the European Parliament this very extraordinary COVID virus recovery fund and the multi-annual 7-year budget to which it's tied. So I just thought I would start there, if you don't mind, Maroš. I mean, it's complicated because there are conditions that are supposed to be attached to this recovery fund involving rule of law. And there seems to be a big debate going on about how tough they should be, whether this is the great chance. So I'm curious, where does this lie now? What are your expectations for this debate? And probably very importantly for the countries involved, when do you realistically expect money might be flowing to them?
Well, thank you very much, Stephen. And I also would like to reciprocate in expressing how big honor it is not to be only interviewed by you, who has so much experience in covering very important diplomatic topics and you know Europe and European Union so well, but also to be invitee to such excellent composition of the speakers, panelists, and discussions organized by Bucharest Forum and Aspen Institute. I was there a few times personally, so I know that it's always very high-level event, and I very much appreciate that it's so timely and that we can have these very important conversations despite the current restrictions and the circumstances under which we have to operate. Of course, and I'm sure that Stephen knows that very well, every time we discuss the budget, there is, of course, lots of excitement until the last moment, because I mean, both the Council, the member states, and of course the negotiators from the European Parliament, they're of course fighting for their positions. But I think that in this particular case, they're united more than ever in also understanding the importance to get to this unprecedented package approved as quickly as possible. As I'm sure that our listeners would know, we are talking about 1.8 trillion euros. So this is more than $2 trillion. So this is massive investment tool which we want to use to kickstart the economy, to really do what every good foresighters will tell you, that it's important not only to restore the economy, but to bounce forward. It means to modernize economy from the green and digital perspective. And what we learned during the crisis, to be much more resilient in the past. So I'm sure that the issues like different budget lines and of course rule of law would be very important issues until the end of the negotiations. Tomorrow I'm traveling to Luxembourg, where we have the General Affairs Council session with the Ministers for Europe, where we'll be debating exactly this. Also in connection with the first ever report which we adopted about the rule of law in all our member states. And I think we've been very fair in telling that there is not one single member state where there is nothing to improve. So that's our collective effort. It's our collective endeavor. And therefore, I believe that we will find the solution in a way that really, as of 1st of January, the member states can see that the money is coming, that the recovery plans are being well advanced in their preparation, and that our citizens can have that a bit of a relief knowing that this financial support is on the way.
One of the things about rule of law, which is interesting, is I've read some of these reports and talked to people. I mean, they're mostly warnings about the future. They're not meant to punish the past. And that's where they're different in a way from this conditionality. So I'm curious, I think it's a good step to pay attention to it. But right now, at least to an outsider like me, these reports are pretty gentle and fairly toothless. But what the parliament and what some of your northern neighbors have in mind is not supposed to be toothless. So how many teeth will there be, do you think?
I think that, of course, we will do our utmost to have as robust mechanism as possible, because in the end, I think that it's in all of our interest to make sure that at first the money is spent well, wise, in economical way, that there is no conflict of interest, or there is not, corruption in using these funds. And for all that, I think we have over the years gathered experience, which we of course want to use in spending this unprecedented sum of money. So I'm sure that the budget will be policed and monitored as never before. That's 100% sure, because we are speaking about unprecedented taxpayers' contribution into the European recovery. And therefore, it takes such an intensive debate and negotiations. But I'm sure, knowing all that importance of kickstarting the economy and modernizing, that our negotiators in the end will find the best possible solution. And of course, as a Commission, we are making the proposals, and until the last minute, we serve the role of the honest broker. And this is what we are going to do until the deal is done.
Sure. Because I mean, one of the other issues which is part of your reports on resilience, is this effort to make sure that a certain proportion of the funds get spent on green and digital investments. How do you expect those would be policed? And do you think there's always a tension between putting people back to work and investing in new technologies that may not produce the same amount of employment right away? How is that debate going?
I mean, you are absolutely right that this is, very delicate balance which we have to work on and which we have to find. And I would say the current situation is as such that as of 15th of November, which is actually in 3 days, we are expecting to get the first draft so-called recovery plans from the member states, where we told them what should be the best possible approach to make the plans from one side comparable, from other side to reflect all that what we called in this Brussels lingua, the country-specific recommendations, meaning the recommendations they've been getting from the European Commission, sometimes for years, concerning the structural reforms which are slowing down the economic performance of the member states. And at the same time, I'm very glad that the leaders, meaning heads of states and government, agreed that 37% of this money should go to the green policies, 20% should go for digital reforms, and the rest would be for this structural change which we want to see in our member states. And from 15th of October, we will start very intensive discussions, again, what we call iteration process, where we will be looking for the common approach between the member states and the European Commission, how this money should be spent, what should be the key projects, but also what should be the so-called milestones. Because I think here it's very important, if you want to spend so much money in such a short period of time, we have to have a good plan, and we have to be able to disburse, to pay the member states along the way. So it means you reach the first milestone, presented the reform, you will get the first tranche. You adopted a new law, which is important, you get the second tranche. So this is the mechanism which is, again, agreed. So what would be very important now is to have very good plans, but also very good I would say, sequence of the projects which would have to be done on the national level, so we can have this flow of investment under the recovery plan. But I would also add one very important thing, and this is that we shouldn't forget about the regular multi-annual financial perspective, because this is also a massive sum of money, and that would be, I'm sure, the role of the Commission to make sure that both the Next Generation EU and the classical 7 years budget would be well linked, so we can really have the synergies and efficiencies we need in this situation.
Because, I mean, one of the changes I hope, many hope, particularly in Central Europe, will be monitoring, because so often money is handed out to governments and then nobody pays any attention to what happens to the money. And as we have reported in certain countries like Hungary, the money tends to go to the political elite, and there's very little monitoring of it, and very little punishment. So this is one of the things that some people find hopeful about this new process. One other question I wanted to ask you is particularly relevant, I think, in Central Europe, is so much of recovery money actually is coming out of national budgets, you know, which are taking very big loans guaranteed by the ECB, which is quite separate from this recovery fund. And some people are very worried that just the wealthier countries will get wealthier, that the inequalities will grow because, you know, a Germany, a France simply has a much bigger economy and more fiscal space to actually borrow money. Is the Commission, I mean, can you do anything about that? Or do you not see that as a problem, or is it just life?
No, I think that if you would have glanced through our strategic foresight report, so there when we've been putting together the data, measuring the resilience in our member states, a very important part of it being actually socio-economic parts of the data, which we clustered in a way that we believe it quite well reflect how resilient our economies are. And of course, the disparities, the gap between rich and poor, the quality of the education, the quality of the healthcare, housing issues, the household debts, and other indicators are clearly telling that if you want to have a resilient economy, you have to have good grades, I would say, good numbers in all of these factors. And it led us also to a bit wider discussion that, which I hope maybe we will be able to discuss next year at Bucharest Forum, that we should revive the debate, which was titled a few years ago, Going Beyond the GDP. Because we see the GDP, which is very much focused on consumption, is not reflecting very well what kind of damages the consumption, especially of, for example, fossil fuels, can cause. And therefore, you're absolutely right that all the things you mentioned, disparities, different conditions on the financial markets, can create also diverse situation in the member states. We have also seen it that, of course, bigger member states are also a better place to provide very massive state aid. And they can do it very quickly because they have powerful administrations. They, of course, have much stronger budgets. But I think that that was one of the reasons why we agreed for this unprecedented combination of the multi-annual financial perspective and Next Generation EU, and also to review, which will be the most in-depth review of the state aid guidelines, more or less how to better focus on what's happening within the European Union, but also how to make sure that we would not create some kind of unfair advantage for third parties, for third countries, which simply do not have any rules concerning state aid and have very often very predatory tactics if it comes to the companies which are otherwise healthy, but because of the COVID crisis became suddenly vulnerable. So this is, I would say, the set of the measures which we are proposing together. And the last one I would mention is a Just Transition Fund, which is focused exactly on those regions and on those parts of the industries which are affected the most by this green transition. So I believe that with all these measures, we would do the utmost to make sure that nobody is left behind and that we would have much fairer policies than otherwise if we wouldn't be working together in the European Union.
Yeah. No, it's good because I think one of the things that worries people about the COVID response is just a growth in inequality within countries also. And when you're talking about state aid in third countries, you weren't talking about Britain by any chance, were you?
I was talking about the third countries because I mean what we felt over the last 2 years was that we have seen how China started to be very dominant in these types of the discussions, and where very often we've been pushing our companies through very tough environmental conditions, through very important reforms if it comes to the energy, where we've been unbundling the big monopolies on our market, just to find out that suddenly they kind of been bought bit by bit and reunited again through some distant headquarters far away from Europe. So I think that we just simply have to learn from that experience and be sure that this will not happen in the future. And if it comes to our UK partners, we very much hope, and I said it publicly, that I will use every minute until the end of the year to find a good deal for the United Kingdom, because I think it's in both our interest, but to have such a strong economy on our shores, whom we are ready to offer unprecedented conditions for the free trade agreement. We also want to make sure that it would be fair deal from the point of view of level playing field, state aid, and other topics. And I think
fishing.
that every fair partner must accept it.
No, that's right. I mean, I'm hearing a little more optimism coming out of the Brexit talks. So I very much hope that you're right. To have no deal would, I think, be a mess for everyone. But what you said about China is, of course, the point. I mean, some people feel that COVID especially has shown up the dependence of the European Union, not just the European Union, but other countries too, on supply chains from China for key medical instruments, as well as precious metals and so on. But this is a delicate balance. I mean, we have China in a very aggressive public position now, very sensitive to criticism, and very eager to try to say to the Europeans, we believe in multilateralism, we're your best pals, while doing Belt and Road and having 17+1. So, I mean, do you think COVID will produce more support, even protectionism, though that's an ugly word, for Europe on these key elements, these key medical supplies? Or will this just fade away, do you think, in the face of this big China, with which I think is the European Union's second largest trading partner?
I think that clearly the COVID was something of an accelerator or amplifier of the trends which been here already before this crisis. And you mentioned, and thank you very much for your kind introductory remarks, that I was responsible for energy before. And for 5 years, I was really dealing in making sure that we would not have this dependency on the supply of fossil fuels as we had before. And the lessons learned was that we have to diversify sources. We have to make our internal market much stronger through different interconnectors, links. We have to learn how to store the energy better and how to be much more efficient and how to develop our indigenous sources like the solar and the wind. And I think the same lesson applies here, because if you look at the so-called technologies of the future, and we are talking about windmills, photovoltaic panels. We are talking about 5G, 6G. We are talking about the batteries and energy storage and hydrogen. For all these new technologies, and on top of it, for the new medicines which we would need in this globalized world, where unfortunately, as it looks like, because of these global interconnections, the pandemics as we are now going through could be more frequent. We need to be fully aware that how the global value chains are working, where we need to diversify the supplies, where we need to have critical stockpiles and stocks in Europe, where we would feel that this is really, I would say, of such a critical material that we have to make sure that we produce it also within the European Union. And we put it under the headline name of the strategic autonomy. And we add one very important word: open. Europe will always be for free and fair trade, but at the same time, we also want to make sure that we would not be limited in our actions if it comes to economic development, of protection of health of our citizens, because of the dependency. So we would be ready to work with the global value chains, with our partners, making sure that whatever the next eventuality would arise, that we would be much better prepared from the industrial, medical, but also economic point of view, because that's, I think that the lessons we have to draw from the first semester of this year.
It's very important because, of course, health wasn't really a European Union competence. So it was very much people, I think, pretty successfully scrambling to do the best they could with a virus that no one understands particularly. I do want to pick you up a little bit on energy, if you don't mind, because one of the big debates going on is this effort to be carbon neutral by 2050, and so there's a debate about what sort of threshold one should have by actually 2030. And that leads me just to ask you about energy dependence, and just frankly to ask about Nord Stream. I mean, are you in the camp that thinks Nord Stream is a terrible thing and makes Germans slaves? Or do you see Nord Stream as a sort of market issue that will help bridge the energy issue between coal and wind and solar?
Thank you very much for that question, because I think it's a very important one. And if it comes to the climate neutrality, that's the goal, the aim, which was approved by all heads of states and governments. And of course, if you're talking about the foresight, then you have to do the backcasting, what it means for 2020 and for 2030. And it's quite clear that if we want to be climate neutral by mid-century, we need to reduce our CO2 emissions by at least 55% by 2030. So currently we are doing very extensive impact assessments, country by country, sector by sector, what it will mean, how we can achieve it, or what should be the new target set for our economies, and we will be presenting it by summer of the next year. Concerning the second question, what I have to say is that the work we did under the Energy Union was a pretty successful one. So currently we see that we have actually abundance of supply of oil and gas, that our companies learn how to store the necessary energy. We built the interconnectors where we have very fluid market. We can help each other anytime we need. We are using much more LNG than before, and we have seen what kind of impact it had as the former dominant suppliers concerning the market behavior and concerning also the price. And that was also, I would say, the logic which we've been using vis-a-vis especially the Ukrainian transit and the Nord Stream. I was really working extremely hard, and I'm very glad that really on the 30th of December of the last year, we finalized all the deals necessary for securing the long-term supply of Russian gas via Ukraine to Central and Eastern and Western Western Europe, and we see that it seems that everything works quite fine. So for the Nord Stream, we've been adopting the approach that the European regulations and the European law must be fully applied, must be fully accepted, and therefore it would be up to the German authorities to make sure that everything concerning this pipeline is properly regulated. And there are very, very clear conditions what has to be done. And we got assurance from the German side that this is the intention to fully respect all the new regulations which are approved also overwhelmingly by the European Parliament and the member states. So we have a new set of the conditions, and I think that they set very strict requirements how any pipeline, including this one in Europe, should operate.
Yes, I mean, I agree with you. I think it's a much safer thing now than it might have been 5 years ago. And you know, I mean, it's 94% done. I suppose at some point Russia will succeed in actually finishing it. But the hope is, and I think from what you say, is the Ukrainian transit fees are at least protected for a while, and it isn't, to me, the great disaster. But just, we're coming very much to an end, which is too bad because we only had a short time. But talk a little bit about what needs to be done by 2030. I mean, I think people talk about this climate adjustment and don't quite understand, you know, the kind of impact it could have on everyone's lives. It is a revolution, and I wondered if you could just talk for a couple minutes about how you see it and how you prepare people for these big changes to come.
I think it's a very, very, very fair point. I think first, that's my, I would say, approach to kind of looking a little bit over the horizon. We should do everything in our power that Europe, not only now but also in the post-2030 world, will be firm part of the top 3 global economies. And then we should be the economy which would be the most advanced in showing, I would say, other partners that you can grow and be environmental friendly, that you can be digital, and at the same time create a lot of new high value added working positions, and that you can be resilient and at the same time support the free and fair trade. Of course, what it would require would be enormous investments coming into this sector. But I can also tell you that from my perspective, because I'm still leading the European Battery Alliance, which we founded together 2.5 years ago. And within this very short period of time, we achieved what nobody believed was possible at that time, that Europe today is the #1 destination for investment into the battery sector. Last year, more than 60 billion euros was invested, which was 3 times more than in China. This year, it's already over 25 billion, which is twice as much as China. So we're clearly #1 investment destination for the production of batteries. And I believe that this green dividend will be similar for the technologies for hydrogen. It will be the same for the green data economics, where we need to make sure that our data processing is much more ecological than before, and that we also would need to be much stronger in enforcing Paris Agreement, because with the exception of United States, all of us, or 99% of the countries on this planet clearly acknowledge that they want to respect it. So for us would be very important that also other partners would have a fair carbon pricing, be it at home, or if not, we would need to introduce the carbon adjustment tax. And we believe that this would bring us the positive impact in the future, where we would have this first mover advantage in the development of our technology, in developing of our new policies. And when I talk to the pension funds, when I talk to the public banks like the European Investment Bank or KfW or other very important financial players, even some governors of the national banks, all of them are very clear that they are pushed by the public opinion, by the shareholders to invest in green, digital, environmental friendly projects. That if I have to simplify a little bit, that we have enough money, but not enough good projects. And therefore, I hope that also by these budgets, which we started to discuss at the beginning, we just push and give additional, I would say, spur into these indigenous activities of our researchers, of our businesses, coming with the projects for which I'm sure there will be very strong financial support.
Well, that's right. And, you know, if Joe Biden becomes president, I expect the US will be back in the Paris Climate Accord very quickly. Now, if we can only convince China and India, which produce 40% of all the world's carbon, to do the same, maybe we'll be able to breathe, or our kids will be. Listen, Vice President Šefčovič, it's been a tremendous pleasure for me. We've run out of time, but I thank you for your patience and what I certainly found to be a very interesting conversation. So best of luck to you, and thank you again, and best of luck to the Bucharest Forum this year. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and I also would like to thank organizers for very timely planning, excellent topics on the agenda, and looking forward to meet you all hopefully in person next year. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Great.